Many, many years ago, in a certain village in Nigeria, an ordinary girl underwent an extraordinary journey which changed the course of her life forever. Dear readers, let us hear the story of Ulima. The sun peeked through the window, casting a warm glow on the modest room Ulima shared with her mother. The walls, adorned with fading photographs, told stories of a happier time. Pictures of her father, smiling and proud, with Ulima nestled in his arms. That was before the weight of grief settled over their small home, stealing away laughter and joy. Now, at 19 years old, Ulima stood alone, staring at the empty space beside her. Her mother had passed just weeks ago, leaving behind only memories and a heart heavy with sorrow. The loss was unbearable, like a wound that refused to heal. They had been each other's lifeline, their bond unbreakable. But now, Ulima was adrift, facing a world that seemed to have turned its back on her. Now, as she busied herself with chores, the sound of the village filtered through the thin walls. Children laughing, vendors shouting, and the distant hum of life moving forward. But for Ulima, every sound was a painful reminder of what she had lost. Her mother had been her rock, the one who taught her to dream, to hope for a better future. But with her passing, those dreams now seemed like distant stars, too far to reach. The day of her departure came sooner than she had expected. A neighbor, Mrs. Abara, had taken it upon herself to help Ulima. "You can go to the city," she had said with a nod of certainty. "You can work as a maid for the AGKs. They need somebody trustworthy, you know. And you earn your keep. Besides, you and your mother were entrusted to Okafor AGK when your father died. It will work out, my dear." Ulima reluctantly agreed, though her heart sank at the thought of leaving her childhood home. With a few meager possessions packed into a small bag, she set out on the journey. Her stomach twisted with uncertainty as the city loomed ahead, a vast expanse of buildings and people, a stark contrast to her quiet village. Now, as she stepped into the bustling streets, she felt small, insignificant, swallowed by the chaos all around her. Arriving at the Ejike household felt surreal. The mansion stood tall and imposing, its grandeur overwhelming. At the entrance, Ulima clutched her bag tightly as a wave of doubt washed over her. What if they didn't like her? What if she couldn't fit in? Before she could second-guess herself, a voice called out, "You must be the new maid." A tall, elegant woman stepped forward, her presence commanding but warm. She introduced herself as Mrs. Chidinma Ejike, the matriarch of the family. "Come in, dear. We've been expecting you." Ulima stepped inside. The cool air greeted her in stark contrast to the heat outside. The mansion was adorned with beautiful art and intricate furnishings, a testament to the family's wealth. It was a world she had never known, a world that shimmered with possibilities but felt completely foreign. As she settled in, she met Uchenna, the 25-year-old son of the family. He was striking, with an athletic build and a warm smile that could light up a room. But beneath his charm, there was an underlying tension, a flicker of frustration in his eyes that hinted at deeper struggles. "Welcome. I hope you find your time here pleasant," he said. Ulima nodded, feeling a mixture of awe and nervousness. Something told her that beneath the surface of this opulent life lay complexities she couldn't begin to understand. As days turned into weeks, Ulima worked diligently, falling into a rhythm, completing household chores while trying to navigate the intricacies of her new life. Slowly, a quiet determination began to take root within her. This was her chance to forge a new path, to honor her mother's memory by making something of herself. Little did she know, the threads of her life were already intertwining with Uchenna's, leading them both toward an unexpected journey of connection and self-discovery. The days settled into a routine for Ulima as she adapted to her new life in the Ejike household. The mansion was always bustling with activity, and she quickly learned the rhythm of the family's daily life. Mornings began with the aroma of rich Nigerian dishes wafting from the kitchen, and the sounds of laughter and chatter filled the air as the family gathered for breakfast. Ulima often found herself in the kitchen alongside Mrs. Chidinma Ejike, Uchenna's mother. Mrs. Ejike, a graceful woman in her mid-40s, had a nurturing aura that enveloped the room. Her bright yellow and orange traditional outfits reflected her warm personality, and she often took a moment to chat with Ulima, asking about her family and life in the village. "You have a gentle spirit, Ulima," Mrs. Ejike said one morning, stirring a pot of jollof rice. "Your presence brings a sense of peace to our home." Ulima smiled, feeling the warmth of acceptance in Mrs. Ejike's words. Despite her initial fears, she began to feel like part of the family, albeit in a different role. Mrs. Ejike's kindness made her feel seen and valued, easing the loneliness that had weighed heavily on her heart. In contrast, Uchenna often kept to himself, lost in thought. A man of privilege, yet there was a palpable tension in his demeanor that intrigued Ulima. His engagement to Nneka Achebe loomed over him like a shadow, and it was clear he was struggling with the expectations placed upon him. Nneka, the stunning fiancée, was everything society expected of a wealthy woman. Tall and elegant, with a fair complexion and a fashionable wardrobe. She exuded confidence, but had a sharp edge that left Ulima feeling uneasy. Nneka was accustomed to the finer things in life, and her commanding presence made it clear she wouldn't tolerate any disruptions to her carefully curated world. As the days passed, Ulima often caught glimpses of Uchenna, lost in thought, staring out of the large windows that overlooked the expensive garden. It was during one of these moments that Ulima mustered the courage to approach him. "Is everything okay, Uchenna?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the silence. "Just thinking," he replied, his tone reflective. "There's a lot on my mind." "Sometimes talking helps," she offered gently, her compassionate nature shining through. Uchenna hesitated, but then nodded as if the weight of his burdens felt a little lighter in her presence. They found themselves talking more often, sharing snippets of their lives. Uchenna spoke of his childhood, the pressures of his engagement, and the expectations that seemed to suffocate him. In turn, Ulima shared stories of her village, her mother's strength, and the lessons she had learned through hardship. Their conversations became a sanctuary for both of them, a space where they could momentarily escape the weight of their realities. But as their connection deepened, so did the tension in the household. Nneka's jealousy simmered beneath the surface, and she kept a watchful eye on Ulima, wary of the budding friendship between her fiancé and the maid. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Uchenna sat at the head of the table and Ulima served the dishes, careful not to draw attention to herself. But Nneka's sharp gaze lingered on her, a predatory glint in her eye. "Uchenna, do you think you'll be ready for the gala next week?" he asked, her voice laced with expectation. "Of course," he said, forcing a smile, but his eyes darted to Ulima, seeking a moment of connection amidst the tension. The dinner continued, but the undercurrent of tension left Ulima feeling unsettled. She could sense the fragile balance of their lives teetering, like a delicate thread ready to snap. The unspoken bond she was forming with Uchenna felt both exhilarating and frightening, but she couldn't help but wonder if it was worth the risk involved. That night, as Ulima lay in bed, her thoughts whirled and swirled. She had come to the city seeking a new beginning. But with each passing day, the complexities of life in the Ejike household began to unfold, revealing a tapestry of emotions she had never anticipated. As Ulima settled into her new life in the Ejike household, the days began to blur together, a whirlwind of chores and responsibilities. Each morning she awoke before dawn, her heart heavy with the weight of her circumstances. The house was grand, filled with intricate decor and luxury that felt worlds above and apart from her modest upbringing. She often found herself in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the family, her hands moving mechanically as her mind wandered. One morning, while serving breakfast, Ulima overheard Uchenna and his parents discussing plans for his upcoming wedding. Her heart sank at the thought of Uchenna, the charming young man with the warm smile and kind eyes, marrying someone else. As he laughed with his parents, a fleeting thought crossed her mind. Was it too late for her to be more than just a maid in this house? That afternoon, while dusting the shelves in the sitting room, Ulima stumbled upon an old photo album tucked away in a corner. Curiosity piqued, she carefully opened it, revealing yellowed photographs of the Ejike family over the years. As she flipped through the pages, her breath caught when she saw a familiar face, a man who looked remarkably like her late father. The resemblance was striking, and it sent a rush of memories flooding back. Suddenly, Uchenna entered the room, catching Ulima off guard. She quickly closed the album, her heart racing. "What were you looking at?" he asked, his curiosity evident. "Just some photos," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Uchenna's eyes narrowed slightly, but then softened. "Those are family memories. My father often spoke of your father. They were friends once," Uchenna answered. Ulima's heart raced at the revelation. "They were?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," Uchenna replied, his eyes distant. "I remember hearing stories about how they would spend time together before things changed." Ulima felt a connection forming between them, a bond that transcended their current circumstances. "My father spoke of your family too," she admitted, her voice steadier. Uchenna responded, "It's strange how life works, isn't it? Here we are on different paths, yet tied together by the past." For a moment, they shared a silence filled with unspoken words, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. Ulima felt a flicker of hope, a glimmer of possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for more than just a maid and a master. As the days passed, Ulima and Uchenna found themselves gravitating towards each other more often. Their conversations flowed easily, revealing layers of vulnerability that neither had anticipated. While Ulima worked tirelessly, she always made time for their fleeting exchanges, each moment solidifying the bond that was forming between them. Yet, amidst the growing connection, Ulima couldn't shake the feeling of impending change. Uchenna was still engaged to Eneka, and Ulima knew that their circumstances were fragile. The shadows of the past loomed over them, threatening to disrupt the fragile peace they were building. The more she learned about Uchenna, the more she realized how much he was trapped in his life, expected to uphold a family legacy that felt more like a burden than a privilege. Ulima's heart ached for him, recognizing that their connection was rooted not only in the past, but also in the loneliness that each of them felt in their respective lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the Ejike household, Ulima looked out the window, contemplating her place in this world. Little did she know, the choices they would make in the days to come would shape their lives forever. As the days turned into weeks, Ulima's life in the Ejike household began to feel less like a burden and more like an opportunity. Uchenna's warmth and kindness created a safe space where she could express herself, and their stolen moments became the highlights of her day. Every shared glance and quiet laugh built a bridge of trust between them, a bridge Ulima longed to cross. One afternoon, while folding freshly laundered linens in the sunlit laundry room, Ulima heard footsteps approaching. She glanced up, surprised to see Uchenna standing at the door, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "Can I join you?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Of course, I could use the company," she replied. As they worked side by side, the conversation flowed naturally. Uchenna spoke candidly about his life, the weight of expectations placed upon him by his family, and the impending marriage to Nneka. Ulima listened intently, her heart aching for him as he shared his frustrations. "I feel trapped," he confessed, folding a linen with a sharp crease. "Everyone expects me to be this perfect son, this perfect fiancé. But what about what I want? It's not easy being in a position where your desires don't align with those of others. You deserve to be happy, Uchenna." "Do you think so?" he asked. "I do. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your happiness for anyone else." Their eyes locked for a moment, and Ulima felt an electric connection, a spark of understanding that transcended their social roles. It was fleeting, but ignited hope within her, hope that their bond could deepen beyond friendship. Later that evening, while preparing dinner, Ulima found herself lost in thought, reflecting on her growing feelings for Uchenna. She couldn't ignore the warmth she felt whenever he was near, or the way her heart raced when he smiled at her. But doubt crept in. What if he chose Nneka? Would she ever truly be more than just a maid to him? As she sliced vegetables, she sensed a presence behind her. Uchenna had entered the kitchen, leaning casually against the counter. "I hope you don't mind me intruding," he said, easing the tension, a smile on his face. "Not at all. Could use the extra help." They worked side by side, cooking in companionable silence. Uchenna's presence was comforting, and Ulima relished the moment when their hands brushed against each other while reaching for ingredients. Simple moments, yet charged with an energy that made her heart race. "Do you ever wish you could escape?" Uchenna asked suddenly. "Sometimes. I dream of traveling, seeing the world beyond my village." "What about you?" Ulima answered. Uchenna sighed. "I do. I want to explore, to find out who I am outside of this family's expectations." "Then why not? You have the means to do it." "Easier said than done," he said. "I have responsibilities. Leaving would disappoint my family." "Your happiness is just as important as theirs. You shouldn't have to carry their dreams if they aren't yours, Uchenna." You always know what to say, Ulima. As the evening wore on, their conversation weaved to deeper threads of trust and understanding. Ulima felt herself drawn to him, not just as a friend, but as someone who understood her in a way few others had. That night, as Ulima lay in bed, she replayed their conversation in her head and mind, the vulnerability they shared, the unspoken and spoken promise of support. It was a bond that felt both fragile and powerful. With each passing day, Ulima realized that Uchenna wasn't just a wealthy young man. He was someone searching for his path, just as she was. And while the shadows of their circumstances loomed large, the light of their connection illuminated a potential future neither of them could have anticipated. As time went by, Ulima's bond with Uchenna deepened in ways she hadn't anticipated. Each day brought new moments of laughter, shared secrets, and stolen glances that made her heart flutter. The air around them crackled with an unspoken tension, a delicate balance between friendship and something more. One afternoon, while dusting the living room, Ulima caught sight of Uchenna practicing his golf swing in the backyard. He was dressed casually in a light polo shirt and grey shorts, his athletic frame moving with ease and grace. The way he concentrated, the muscles in his arms flexing with each swing, made her pause to admire him. A wave of warmth washed over her, and she quickly averted her gaze, her cheeks blushing with emotion. "Come join me," Uchenna waved her over, a smile spreading across his face. "I could use some advice," she teased. She set down the duster and stepped outside, her heart pounding. "I'm not sure how much help I can be," she replied, a smile playing on her lips. "Just watch and tell me what you think," he said, positioning himself for another swing. Ulima watched him, admiration and longing welling within her. Each time he made contact with the ball, it sent a thrill through her, a reminder of the connection they shared. After a few swings, Uchenna stepped back, wiping his brow. "Okay, your turn now. Show me how it's done." "What? Me? I've never played golf before." "Exactly. It'll be fun." With a nervous breath, Ulima picked up the club, her heart racing. Uchenna stood close, guiding her, his presence intoxicating. As he leaned in to help her align the club, butterflies swirled in her stomach. "Just relax and follow through," as he said. The ball flew into the distance. Ulima's laughter echoed in the air. "Not bad for a beginner," Uchenna cheered, his eyes sparkling with excitement. For a moment, the world around them faded, and Ulima felt an undeniable pull towards Uchenna. Their eyes locked, and her breath hitched. The air between them was thick with tension and a palpable electricity hanging in the air. But then, Uchenna stepped back, breaking the spell. "Let's grab some drinks," he suggested, turning towards the house. Ulima's heart sank. The moment had felt so close, yet they were still worlds apart. As they walked back inside, she wrestled with her emotions, uncertainty gnawing at her. Did he feel the same way, or was it just her imagination? Later that evening, while washing dishes, Ulima couldn't shake the feeling of yearning. She felt more connected to Uchenna than ever, yet the fear of crossing a line loomed over her like a dark cloud. "Hey, are you all right?" Uchenna's voice broke through her thoughts. "I'm fine," she replied, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You don't seem fine. Talk to me." Ulima hesitated, her heart pounding. It's just, everything is changing so fast. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. You can always talk to me. I'm here for you, Ulima. The sincerity in his words melted her apprehensions, and Ulima found the courage to share her feelings. I've never felt this way about someone before. It's confusing. What do you mean? Uchenna asked, surprised. Being around you makes me feel things I didn't expect. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I can't help it, Ulima answered. A heavy silence filled the room as Uchenna processed her words. The air thickened with unspoken emotions, and Ulima's heart raced with anticipation. Uchenna finally admitted. I feel it too, he confessed, his voice low and earnest, but everything is so complicated. You're engaged to Nneka. What does that mean for us? I don't want to hurt anyone, Uchenna answered, but I can't ignore how I feel about you. In that moment, Ulima knew they were standing at a crossroads, caught between duty and desire. The road ahead was uncertain, but the connection they shared was undeniable. As the evening drew to a close, Ulima felt a swirl of emotions, hope, apprehension. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she had forged a bond with Uchenna that would change everything. As a maid, Ulima had always been careful around Uchenna. She kept her head down, stayed out of his way, doing her best to keep things professional. But ever since that day they confessed their feelings, there was an undeniable tension lingering between them, one that neither of them could ignore. Tonight, as the rest of the household fell asleep, Ulima found herself drawn to the garden once again. She sought solace in its quiet beauty, the stillness, the cool night air, the scent of the blooms. She wasn't expecting anyone to be there, least of all Uchenna. Ulima, his voice startled her, making her turn quickly. There he stood, by the garden entrance, his silhouette bathed in the glow of the moonlight. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I could ask you the same thing, he replied. His eyes locked into hers, filled with an intensity that made her heart race. They stood in silence for a moment. The air between them was charged, thick with unspoken words, a pull neither of them could deny. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, Ulima. His voice was low, filled with a rawness that caught Ulima off guard. His hand reached for hers, and despite everything, she didn't pull away. Uchenna, this isn't right, she whispered. But even as the words left her lips, her heart betrayed her. I know, he murmured, now just inches away. But I don't care. And then everything faded. The world around them disappeared. Uchenna pulled her into his arms, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and urgent. Every barrier they had built, every line they tried not to cross, crumbled in an instant. And there, under the stars, surrounded by the blooms of the garden, they crossed a line that would change their lives forever. This is where we end our story for the day, my dear readers. Please make sure to subscribe and like this video, and please tune in for the next part of Ulima and Uchenna's mesmerizing love story. Thank you all so much for watching, and please make sure that you click the notification bell so that you are notified for the next installment of this wonderful story. Until then,